should have a microphone next to each other. So, just to reflect in terms of this session and talk about this particular topic. So hands up, if we take a show of hands, who could present and deliver an understanding of cultured meat and the technology behind it and the commercialization? Could I have a hands up of anybody that could give me a 10-minute presentation on that? No. Fairly happening, and in America, there's a brand that's going to launch a new range fairly shortly, just going through final levels of their legislation. And the other context I had before I introduced the team, and I guess you must have had the same, is I've read a lot of positives about the ethical side. It's safe. It's something that, if you think of the world in which we live, there's a population growth estimated to 2050 of 1.2 billion people. That's about a 22% increase in people around the world. With the increase of urbanization and selection and interest in food, there's a demand of 70% increase in food as well. So those two kind of indexes don't quite relate here in terms of thinking about arable farming and what we have right now. So there's definitely an opportunity there. On the other side, my question is, where does this fit? And we had some really interesting discussion here about the plant-based and where that is and what stage it is in terms of acceptance with consumers. So without further ado, I'll just firstly introduce as we go around the table. So if you could.
So I think maybe what we could do is to say, who has heard about cultivated meat? Well, okay. See, at least something is there, so yeah. So we're on the right path. So thank you for having me. My name is Martijn Everts, working for Mosa Meat. We are pioneers in the cultivated meat space. We are producing meat in a different way. We are bringing cleaner, kinder way of making beef by the technology of cellular agriculture.
Thank you very much.
My name is Kerem. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Biftek. We are not a meat company, but we are providing technologies to meat companies, cultivated meat companies. You may think like the ingredients of the meat itself. So we are producing growth medium supplements to make cultured meat affordable. So the thing is the price in our case. So we would like to do a good for the world.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Simon. This is Siddharth. I'm the co-founder of ClearMeat, India's first and only ISO-certified lab-grown meat company, which is focused on two parameters. One is cell growth media, and the other is meat itself.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think my next question then, Martin, you're probably guessing it, is could you just help the audience just understand a little bit more about your product and what that looks like in terms of a commercial proposition?
Okay, so maybe it's good to indeed clarify for everybody in the room, like what is cultivated meat about, right? Some do know, some have some sort of understanding, maybe not everybody knows exactly what it is about. So we're making beef in a different way. Cellular agriculture is about making beef starting with cells from the cow, in our case with the cows. So Mosa Meat focuses on the cow, on beef, because it's the most detrimental. It's a very inefficient animal in terms of conversion, and it's very high in price per kilo. So what we do basically is we take a biopsy, a very small piece out of the butt, the muscle of the cow, and from that little piece we make a process of selecting these cells that have the most potential to proliferate. This is another word for multiply. And then these multiplied cells, billions of them, need to mature into tissue, which is the phase of what we describe as differentiation. And that tissue, this is where the whole functionality comes into place in terms of nutrition, but also in terms of organoleptics and taste. So that tissue we grow in large bioreactors. Think in the future about beer breweries in terms of how you could view that in the future. And all these cells are there and then further mature into tissue of both muscle and fat. And these two components we bring together, and then you have the core components of meat. So that's what we're doing. That's the basis of cultivated meat.
Well, that's fascinating, and I'm pretty, as I said to you last week when you described this, I'm pleased you've shared that with the audience. Karen, could you just share a little bit about your business and how that works and what that offers in terms of the whole of the production?
Yes, actually Martin explained the structure very well. You start with the stem cell and you have to end up with the meat itself for the commercialization. But in between there are lots of problems. You have to proliferate and differentiate those stem cells into muscle cells or fat cells. So in order to do that, you have to use a growth medium. So those growth mediums are very, very expensive, insanely expensive as of today. And if you would like to produce a commercial product, you have to innovate in this space. So we pick our technology to introduce novel methodologies in that area. So instead of using conventional fetal bovine serum, in our industry everyone knows it, or recombinant growth factor, which is genetically modified factors, proteins and other stuff, we introduce microorganism-based supplements which increase the efficiency of growth medium already used in laboratories. So there has to be some breakthroughs. So we would like to be one of those companies and increase the efficiency of this process in order to cut down cost. If we cannot cut down cost, this will be just a scientific project, and this will not be the commercial product at the end of the day. So instead of producing our own meat, which has lots of problems, like bioreactors, scaffolding, microcarriers, growth medium, we focused on the growth medium and would like to innovate in that area.
That's fascinating. And do you see that then, just to get in simple languages, is that acting to overall accelerate and increase the yield? What's the position on that?
Yes, you are right.
The value proposition.
Actually, we are increasing the efficiency of the growth medium used in the process because there are some active pathways and we are giving some correct signals to the cells. And by this methodology, those signals are obtained by the cells and it starts to proliferate and differentiate. So with the same amount of growth medium, you can increase the yield by 4-fold, 5-fold, depending on the type of the cell.
That's fascinating. Thank you. Thank you. And Siddharth, can you just describe your technology, just to get an understanding?
So, to give a brief to the audience, what these two guys are doing, we are in the middle of that, somewhere in line with that. So, everyone in this industry is trying to figure out how to grow meat with a sustainable perspective. When you talk about growing meat, it has 4 parameters to it. One is taste, another is texture, next is the nutrition, and 4th is the smell. To achieve all these 4 parameters, apart from the price of the product also, to achieve all these parameters, Mosa is talking about making meat. Biftek is talking about using the right sustainable solutions to do that in a high proficiency format. We at ClearMeat are trying to figure out a way which is slightly in line with them, but a different strategy. So when you talk about growing cells, cells itself require a lot of, there are different cell types to it. So you require multiple cell types to make a meat product. And growing these cells requires fetal bovine serum. Already they are doing it. They are replacing fetal bovine serum using microorganisms. But at our end, what we have done is, fetal bovine serum again is made by or obtained by killing calves, so which does not do justice to the whole vision of this industry. So what we have done is we have identified a replacement for fetal bovine serum. This replacement now is made up of natural components and it is now a patented product for us. So this justifies the whole vision, brings out more product in the line of sustainability and more nutritious at the end.
Well, that's fascinating. And again, and you guys have met me last week and we talked about this, just the levels of the investment, if you like, of the technology and the science. But I want to come back to you, Martin, in terms of your position and where you are in the kind of commercial world. And again, just a reflection of thinking about the consumer and the shopper here. They're purchasing meat. They have an increase in, if you like, provenance of meat. There is the plant-based meat alternatives that are out there that, you know, some say, and there's some trends to say, has it flattened, has it softened? So where does this fit for you, and how have you begun commercializing that?
May I elaborate a little bit on my previous speakers, on my fellow panelists, because we used the word growth media right before,
Yeah.
which is, and nowadays we use a word which is a bit more descriptive. It's called cell feed. So these cells, they need to bring in an environment. We need to bring them in an environment that they effectively do what they normally do within the animal, right? Which is growing. So this is just for the non-scientists to help understand what we're really talking about. Yeah? And then to your question, so where are we in terms of commercialization? Where and how we see this in terms of compared to what's already on the market? So indeed, so we are transitioning from a scientific R&D driven setup towards a true commercial food company. So we have indeed a pilot facility in place where we produce these cultivated beef. We are applying for regulatory approval across different markets, and we may want to talk about that point a little bit later on as well. We're scaling up our production volumes and bringing the cost down. And it's very probable that we will enter markets fairly soon in different geographies in the world. And we are not the first one. There's already a company in Singapore. I think you mentioned that in your introduction. So factually, it is already out there, but not at very large scale. And that will take time. So the way we approach it is quite similar to an extent as the plant-based meat industry has done this before. So going over food service through restaurants first, which would allow us to manage volumes, to bring it into an environment in where chefs and restaurant holders can talk about it, where we can share the story behind cultivated meat and what it has to offer. Before we then enter a phase where the product is getting more, let's say, cheaper, and so that and the volumes are getting up, so that we can then go into classical retail and quick service restaurant environments.
No, it's fascinating, and building that model, I guess, of trial takes the advocacy, which is most important, like you say, into the food service piece. In terms of, I guess, the other question that's related to the challenge, which you touched on, was a legislative one, and clearly Singapore has driven, you know, the model and the way ahead. It looks like, from what I've read and from what you've described, I'm sure the USA is getting there. What challenges have you come across that you say are, I guess, in terms of the surmountable and the most, and give us a sense of where you see that for us as a picture? You know, is it a regional issue? Is it what's the kind of issues that you see out there?
As an industry, right?
Yeah.
Question to me?
Yes, please.
Okay, and please elaborate on that anytime.
I'll be asking the others this
Yeah.
too.
Thank you. So there are three big challenges that we face as an industry in the making. So one is, I touched on, is the regulatory environment. So these products are new and they are under what we call novel foods. So they need to follow a path to get approval on the novel foods. There are at the moment two defined paths in the world. Singapore is said, and then it's Europe, where we have under European Food Safety Authorities another framework. So there are two what we call defined paths, and there is a lot of country movement into defining the path defining the final framework. And this is the second challenge we have as an industry, is bringing volumes up and costs down. The major challenge within that is touched upon by Karen, is the growth media. And the growth media is this liquid in which the cells need to grow. This is a matter of time. So the fact that it is so expensive at the moment is because it's coming from the medical field, this whole technology. And therefore, we are used to work with pharma-grade ingredients. At Mosa Meat, we work with a strategic partner. It's called Nutreco. And together with them, we are working to replace pharma-grade ingredients to feed and food-grade ingredients that are widely available at scale and at a much lower cost while being sustainable. So this is a matter of time, and we are convinced we're getting there because we're making very strong steps. The third challenge we have, and again this is not for Mosa Meat only, but for the industry in the making, is the acceptance by customers and consumers. And there we have good hopes. I saw some earlier presentations with some doubts as well. And this is somewhat normal because there are people that are very enthusiastic and some people have some more questions. I guess also this is also a matter of time. But also it requires a strong effort from all of us in the industry, but also in the wider ecosystem, including partners, retailers, food service companies, meat and plant-based manufacturers, to collectively drive that awareness and seeing the benefits of cultivated meat, as it is a fantastic solution to answer the full needs that people have when wanting to have delicious meat, but not wanting to have all the negative side effects that we all know now that are clearly there.
Yeah, no, sure, thank you, and thanks for giving that a perspective. I'd like to turn to you, Karen, with your position and the proposition of your offering. What sort of challenges have you come across through your lens of your business?
Actually, as we are supplying technology, we identify a number of problems. So those problems should be solved not individually, but collaboratively. So companies like Mosa, who are creating a brand for consumers, has lots of problems like bioreactors, scaffolding, growth media, microcarrier, and companies like myself and Siddharth's company are providing those technologies. However, there is no one methodology for the commercialization. So the industry is like 10 years old. Once we started this business, there were like 50 companies. Nowadays, it is like 150 companies. And still, there is no one correct. So we have to come up with a methodology. People are trying novel stuff. So this is a deep tech, and deep tech should be financed by VC money. Although there is a light at the end of the tunnel, deep tech takes lots of time. Right? So you are doing a very novel stuff. It is something like Ford Model T before the first investment, or Tesla car before the first investment, or Apple computer before the first investment. So we are at the very beginning of the era, and it will jump up to a certain point when there are breakthroughs from companies like ourselves or other startups.
That's fascinating. So, I guess in that lens of the startup and the fact that everybody is working hard, people want a slice of the pie. You know, the investors, like you said, fairly quickly. I think all of you talked about a collaborative piece. What's your feeling? I mean, should everybody have certain levels of collaboration? How do we get there to become, if you like, as an association or whatever it might be? How do we get to become a successful in that sense?
If you want to change the world, or if you come up with a great product, you have to you have to partition the problem and try to solve each and every problem by the experts. So if we can do it, it is like doing a plane, right? A plane or a car may be composed of thousands of devices or things, and every expert should work on it. So it is going to be the same stuff. So every problem will be solved by individual companies, and if we can bring all together and integrate those solutions, then we can come up with a novel product which might be grasped by general public. So I think collaborative approach is very important.
Okay, thank you. And just with that, Dr. Siddharth, if I look at the Indian population, it's now overtaken China, and it's set to grow again in the coming years. But thinking about the cultivated meat and where that fits, and thinking about the culture, and if you like, the socio-culture aspect of foods and plant foods, where does this fit? What's your thinking on the modelling for you and that business?
Just to give a brief, and to start from the point they left, you talk about collaboration and the problems. And India, per se representing Asia as of now, it somewhat gives you a perspective how the audience will react to it. So when you talk about the problems, in the vegetable problem, the people have to fund in it to grow. A consumer problem, how the consumer accepts it. And the third one is how we create a technology that is collaborative. Now, when these three problems are somehow resolved, ultimately when you look at the customer acceptance, if you talk about India, hypothetically India has been looked at a country which is mostly vegetarian by origin. But if you look at the census, government census, 65% of the population is non-vegetarian. But we have been working on ground with various e-commerce websites that sell out meat to the Indian consumers. It is astonishing to see that 80 to 90% of the individuals are interested in meat, so that means they are non-vegetarian. However, out of this 80 to 90% people who are buying meat online, 60 to 70% are more inclined toward delicacies. So when you talk about India, India as a country has been observed where three major meat categories work. One is chicken, another is mutton, and the third one is fish. But this e-commerce data gives you an edge to understand that the consumer perspective is slightly different from how we observe, how we have an observation of it. And looking on those lines, we all three, or every industry, or every company in this industry needs to collaborate on these lines to understand the right region-specific demands, because there is a limitation of growth every industry will have or every group will have, and we have to work hand in hand to create a strategy that is collective and parallelly meets the demand of the audience. And when you talk about the Indian perspective and the consumer perspective, policy making is one of the major catch to it. We have been observing how policies have evolved in the last couple of years. Singapore has some policies on trade that is out just for a product launch. India, Martin was rightfully able to define the novel meat strategy. India does have a strategy for pushing these products in the market. It comes with a novel food strategy. And we at ClearMeat have already obtained few licenses, so there are a number of licenses. So countries are pro to it, but there is a definition between GMO and non-GMO, the technology being used. So again, it boils down to how collectively we resolve it.
No, that's fascinating, and I guess channel-wise, you would consider how you would move towards the exploitation of their commercialization too?
Yes, when you talk about import-export strategies,
yeah.
it will always remain a challenge from a company which is in India to hypothetically create a setup in Turkey or in the Netherlands or in San Francisco. But we have to find out synergies to penetrate each and every market, and that can only happen once we are able or on the right direction with the right mindset.
Okay, thank you. And we've just got time for one more question, which I did ask you about earlier, but just to kind of prime the audience here, you know, we think about, as I said, this technology that's real, it's happening, it's already a commercial. But I'd just like to talk to each of you and ask a final question on what you see as, or what does success look like, both for you and for the industry. So again, I'll just start in order. Martin, can you give us a brief perspective on that, please?
Sure. I think that what would be fantastic in 5 to 10 years if we entering Dubai, Amsterdam, San Francisco, or India, or Turkey, or any country in the world, and we see cultivated meat being fully accepted as a category and as a choice amongst other choices. It's not either or. We need all the different options that are being investigated at the moment and being deployed at the moment, because, as you said in the beginning, the demand is going to be 50 to 70 or 80%, depending on the source you look at, higher than it is today. With the current practices, we simply are not able to serve these needs. So if we have that widely at scale, not only being there, but widely at scale at a price which is comparable or even lower than conventional meat, I think that would be a nice picture of success.
Thank you, Martin. Karen?
Actually, I started my entrepreneur life by producing data products for farms. So we were collecting data from satellites, sensors, soil, weather, and producing some actionable insight for farmers. Then I moved to climate adaptation startup, where we track severe weather conditions, hail, storms, tornadoes, to give information to insurance companies. In those two startups, I learned if you do industrial farming intensively, then you ruin climate. If you ruin climate, then you cannot produce food. So it's a vicious cycle, and we don't need time. Time is ticking, and we have to find novel ways to produce food. So Biftek is my third endeavor, who may solve these challenges. If you do the deforestation, what will happen? If you ruin your soil with fertilization, or if you run out of water because of drought, what will happen? Are we going to sustain our future? Are we going to pay the fees for our children? So this kind of needs brings us to produce food in novel ways. So cultured meat or cellular agriculture is one of the solutions, and maybe the next best thing.
Thank you. And Dr. Siddharth.
So I would give two thoughts to it. So my parameters are defined on two lines. Before that, everyone is out here to make money, but partly after making money, we have to understand that it has to be a more sustainable way of making money. And at ClearMeat, we see success on two lines. Number one line is that you are eating a chicken burger which is made from a chicken which is sitting just next to you. This is one achievement. The next achievement is that you are eating meat which is able to replace your requirement of nutrition or medications from third parties or chemically. That means the meat made in lab or cultivated meat is nutritious enough to give you the right energy and the right medication or immunity to tackle to diseases.
No, that's fascinating. Thank you. And just in closing, as I said, I was very consciously incompetent last week, as you know, and understanding a bit more about the knowledge of this particular category and where it's headed. The backdrop is still the population increase, which we can't control. It's the use of land that's going to increase. It's the drivers of sustainability, etc., which make this a proposition that is extremely strong. And I'm delighted to have had this opportunity to actually interview each of you and talk about, a business model that I wouldn't have been aware of this time last year. And I'm really excited by what the future holds, and looking forward to seeing presenting this at next year's show. So thank you all each for your time. Thank you.